It's Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of MALN Opinion Plus, a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. This week, we're joined by Maria Mossaides, Director of the Office of the Child Advocate. Thanks for joining us today, Maria.
It's always a pleasure to be invited back.
Of course. So it's been a few months since we last touched base with the office, and I was wondering, could you just update me with the work you guys have been doing since we last talked over the summer and through the beginning of this fall?
Well, it's been obviously a busy period of time when we were able to complete several studies that we were asked to by the legislature. One was to complete a study of all child abuse and neglect mandatory reporting laws in Massachusetts, and we completed that work in July. We also launched and will continue to do through this fiscal year that began in July, a transition age youth pilot program for homeless youth who had been in the custody of the Department of Children and Families. And we launched that last year in anticipation of youth being more homeless than usual, because for kids who normally would couch surf, that the pandemic meant that people were not inviting them to their homes to couch surf. So we wanted to make sure that there were spaces that could welcome these youth. And last but not least, we also completed an impact study of COVID on children and youth who were juvenile justice involved. And obviously showed that although arrests of youth went down because youth were not obviously out and about, that unfortunately youth who had been arrested oftentimes spent more time in jail because the courts were closed, and therefore jury trials could not occur that would resulted in many of these youth being released. So it's been a pretty busy period since the last time we got to chat.
Wow. So I'm kind of interested to hear about the studies that you guys worked on over the past months. Could you tell me a little bit about what you guys learned from those?
Sure. We were asked to look at the child abuse and neglect laws in Massachusetts. There was concern particularly in a couple of areas that the legislature wanted us to address. One was that there was Massachusetts is one of the few states that does not have as a list of mandatory reporters coaches and institutions of higher education where a lot of the sports programs are held. And obviously, as a result of the Penn State scandal and the U.S. Olympic scandal, there was a tremendous concern that we look at other states that have recently updated their laws to make sure that all sports-related activities are treated as mandatory reporters. And so that was one of the areas that we looked at. We also looked at how mandatory reporters receive training. And we in Massachusetts do not have any public entity charged with making sure that mandatory reporters know of their obligation under the law. And so we did a thorough review of all 50 states, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, to make sure that changes that were made to update their laws, we evaluated those changes against our current law and outlined, I think, a couple of steps that the legislature, we hope, will consider this year. And as a result, we are going to launch this year a special pilot training program for public school teachers, which we hope to have in place by the beginning of the next school year, so that public school teachers can be better informed of the kinds of cases that should be reported as suspected cases of abuse and neglect, and cases that don't rise to the problems of abuse and neglect, for which families can be directed to other state services, but do not have to come to the attention of the Commonwealth's Child Protective Service Agency.
Oh, that sounds like important work. Now, could you tell me a little bit about that, what the responsibilities of a mandatory reporter actually look like in our school systems?
Sure.
And what the changes are that you're trying to make?
Yeah, teachers are the largest group of mandated reporters. So, of all of the 160,000 reports of abuse and neglect that the Department of Children and Family gets on an annual basis, teachers represent, I think, like 85% of those cases that get identified come from teachers. The next two largest categories are first responders, whether they're police or EMTs, and obviously emergency department doctors are number three. But teachers really, because they spend more time with children, children have to be in school, and whether that's early education, daycares and family daycare homes, or public schools, most kids spend a good chunk of their time in school. Teachers get to know children. Children also trust teachers. And so they may oftentimes disclose situations to a trusted person, such as a teacher, that they may not have said. And that's particularly true of children who might be the victim of sexual abuse, that they're likely to say something to a teacher. They're likely to say something to a teacher about abuse in the home. If a child comes to school with bruises, teachers are going to ask, how did you get that bruise? And if the story doesn't sound right, they're liable to ask the child for some additional information. So teachers, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country, are the primary protectors of children by identifying circumstances where there may be abuse and neglect. And during the pandemic, both in Massachusetts and across the country, the number of allegations of abuse and neglect, filings of abuse and neglect with state agencies during the pandemic dropped by 60% because children were not in school and therefore not being seen by teachers. And that was a big concern. And the last time I was on the show, we talked about the importance of neighbors looking out to make sure the children were okay, because their teachers were not going to be able to be there to protect them.
Wow, that sounds so important. So the last time I spoke with Melissa Threadgill, also we talked a lot about your concerns around mental illness in kids and teens who were stuck at home learning online. Could you tell me a little bit about how that situation has maybe changed or been altered by the fact that now Boston schools are now fully back in person?
Sure. Let me start by sharing some information. I think the pandemic restrictions, people being stuck at home, not being able to go out, and the financial strains for many families because people couldn't work, or mothers had to stay at home, or fathers had to stay at home, and there was only one income. What we saw and what's been seen nationally is that when there was been an increase in physical abuse of school-age children during the pandemic. Let me share a little bit about our Massachusetts numbers. Between fiscal year 20 and 21, which was last year, the number of overdoses that we are examining at the Office of the Child Advocate increased by 45%. The number of suicide attempts of children increased by 73%. And the number of victims of violence increased by 87%. So clearly the concerns that we had last year around people reacting because of the stress that they were under has really been now borne out by our numbers in Massachusetts and by national numbers. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Office of the Child Advocate invested in a software that we developed in conjunction with the Department of Mental Health called handholdmass.org. We were able to quickly get assistance for families in this software, this website that we launched that involved middle school age children. And I'm pleased to announce that we have now added information on younger children and information on high school students. So handholdmass.org is now a fully functioning website that provides assistance to parents in identifying behaviors that their children might be exhibiting and whether they're serious or not, how to intervene, and how to access all of the state services that are available to support children and their families.
Now, I was wondering a little bit about the Handhold initiative. Are you guys planning on taking that work off online and into the schools in some way at all, since you now have this access to people who are learning in person?
Right. So we have a great news to share with everyone. This year, the Massachusetts legislature and the governor approved some significant funding. And the Office of the Child Advocate, in conjunction with the University of Massachusetts Medical School, in a couple of weeks is going to launch a brand new child wellness center. And that child wellness center, which we're going to pilot this year, we are expecting will support both schools, public schools, private schools. It'll support children who are in residential programs across the Commonwealth, and it'll support early educators. So we are hoping that by providing training and technical assistance, that we will be able to reach to all organizations that provide services to the children in a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive way. Our goal is to be able to support children always so that they can reach their full potential, become healthy and functioning adults, and we want them to thrive in their communities and support their communities.
Sounds like really important work that you guys are doing.
We are.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you mind telling me some ways that parents in our audience who are curious about your work might learn more or find more information on the services that you guys are working on?
Sure. Our website, which is you go to mass.gov and look up the Office of the Child Advocate, will bring you to our website, has continuous information on all of our projects. What we expect to do beginning this month is, for the first time, issuing a newsletter. And so very shortly, people will be able to go on at our website on mass.gov and will be able to sign up for our newsletter. And so they will be getting, we're going to start it at every other month. We may be able to eventually go month, but that will give parents and caretakers information about the projects that we're doing and information that will be useful to them. We do have a Twitter feed of the OCA, and on that Twitter feed and our Facebook page, we post information that's interesting to parents, right? Tips and tools that they can use around child safety, accident prevention, and assistance, and other tools that are available publicly in Massachusetts that will be able to help parents to do the really tough job. The toughest job that anyone can have is raising a child these days.
Now we're coming up on time here, but just with our last few seconds left, would you like to talk about any other work the office is doing at the moment, or mention any new resources?
I would say that the other thing that I would love to sort of mention is that the Office of the Child Advocate, in partnership with the Department of Youth Services, is going to be launching 3 distinct learning labs that will explore diverting juveniles from entering the juvenile justice system. This was work that the legislature asked us to undertake in 2018, and we are really proud that Massachusetts is moving to a situation in which we are really hoping to eliminate the school to prison pipeline and to make sure that children and youth who get into a scrap are appropriately diverted, get the services they need, so that there won't be a need for further juvenile justice involvement. And we're really proud of the fact that we were able to continue this work during the pandemic, or at least last year during the pandemic. And 3 partners are now going to launch 3 different models of learning labs, and we will know more next year, with the hope that we will eventually be able to expand these to every county in the Commonwealth.
Great. I just want to thank you again so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with us and for being our guest on MALN Opinion Plus.
It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to share the Office of the Child Advocate's needs with your listeners. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Anytime. Thank you. Join us for another episode next week. And for more information about our discussion today, you can check out our web story on malatinonews.com. You can follow us on Twitter at MALatinoNews and Instagram at MA_Latino News. I'm Diego Villarreal with MALN Opinion Plus. See you next time.